that has just taken such a lot of holding for such a long time, and my gratitude goes to Skeena and to all the people that have supported this to get here now. Let's see what possibilities can be opened when we let go of the expectations that limit us. Welcome, Skeena.
Thank you, April. Good morning, everybody. And yeah, this is feels a really sacred moment because we've all been working so hard. I think actually the whole of the climate justice movement, the environmental movement, the movement of social, equalities, the justice movement, the anti-racism movement, it feels like this work it's standing on such wide shoulders with so much work and heart and love and tenacity and exploration that's been put in for decades, right? Decades. So I just really want to recognize how deep this journey that we're making is, and how where we've come from. It's just so wonderful to be here with you. I'm celebrating so much in my whole body. And I think the place I'd like to start is and is a practice that we might share for visioning. And I want to first just say something about why we might share this from an intellectual point, from a cognitive point, because there's always so much discomfort in us going into that spiritual intelligence and going into the heart brain and going into where we meet what's outside us that is unknown, the mystery, right? And yet there's such, and this is the era we're living in, there's such great science, if that's and rational thinking, if that's what speaks to you about why we would do this work together. And I'm actually going to start from why we would do it as a movement that wants to appeal to a mass psychology, because when we formed XR, we were working with Jane Morton's emergency mode messaging model. And one is describe the problem in emotive ways and wake people's hearts up, right? Describe the science and describe the heart of the problem. And two is speak to it from a place of values and from a place of morality and what that means to you. And three is and speak to the vision, articulate a vision for people, because Martin Luther King said he had a dream. He didn't say he had a nightmare. He said he had a dream, and we have a dream, right? And it's XR, our first principle and value is that we have a shared vision for change. And I think it's that piece, it's that third piece that we haven't quite been able to really get stuck into, right? And to really make the space for, give the nourishment to, explore together, trust that it's an essential piece. I think there's some stuff that's in the way. And I want to bring in Cassandra Veaton's work as well from the Noetics Institute to say that, this is an institute that is blending all kinds of science, neuroscience, science of biology, science of physics, psychology, sociology, philosophy, right? It's blending lots of sciences. And the thing that it's also coming up with is how important it is for us to share a vision. And the bit that feels really key is that when in this culture we talk about vision, we still do it through the mind most often. We still do it through the mind. And what the Noetics Institute is talking about is actually a vision doing something that is in the heart's eye rather than the mind's eye. Yeah. And mind plays its part, but it's in the heart's eye. And this takes me back to some Aboriginal law, which says it is the keeper of the heart's intent that manifests into reality. It is the heart's intent and the keepers of it, and what their heart's intent is longing for and visioning and feeling for and wanting and desiring and creating in from a heart space that comes into manifestation. So that's why I would love you to join me in this practice. And if it feels uncomfortable, if you can witness, then that is wonderful. And that is wonderful. Yeah. So here we go. We're going to be in it for about 7-8 minutes together. Okay. So inviting you to become really comfortable where you are and sensing your whole body coming into that trusting space that you are a whole body, a whole presence. And when you're ready, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and to go into that space without the sensory input from the outside world. So you're trusting the inside space now. And feeling your feet in space and feeling your pelvis in space and feeling the crown of your head in space. And imagine now that you're dropping an anchor. You're dropping an anchor to the earth, to Mother Earth. That you're entirely safe. You're anchored in the earth, in the Great Mother. She's holding you. And as you feel the crown, so taking body awareness into the crown of your head, feel the heavens also holding you, whatever that means for you. Connection to sky, connection to the length of you, connection to everything that is, to all that is, to the mystery, to the great mystery. And as you do this now, coming into your heart's awareness and coming into your heart's rhythm, your heartbeat, that essential organ that is created at 40 days of conception, the first organ that is created. And feel your heart. See your heart, feel your heart. And as you do this, imagine your heart's breath. Imagine your heart breathing. Breathing in and breathing out. For you, with you. And as you do this, let your heart remember that heart has upward of 40,000 to about 60,000 memory cells, neural cells. Bring in your heart's memory for something that you love. It could be a place, it could be someone, it could be an animal, it could be an experience, something that you love, your heart loves, something that your heart loves. Let your heart remember and breathe with this feeling, with this memory. We're creating heart coherence. We're creating heart resilience together as we remember and think through our hearts. This is what we're doing. We're thinking through our hearts. And then as you do this, see your light. See your light in your heart. See your heart as light, as energy, as fire. And as you do that, feel that light go upwards into your pineal gland, into your third eye space, between your eyebrows. These are your visioning muscles. We're going to enter light into your visioning muscles now. Feel the light in your ears. This is also Rumi prayer. This is the first prayer he said every morning. It was a light prayer for his ears, for your eyes, for our eyes. Feel the light in your eyes. Feel the light in your throat. Feel the light in your bloodstream. Feel the light in your bones. Feel the light on your tongue. Feel the light on your back. Feel the light on your front. The light on your right and the light on your left. The light above you and the light below you. Feel your light and the light around you from your heart. And breathe with this light. You can keep going back to the memory that your heart loves to remember as a place of anchor as you feel your light surround you and inside you. And we're going to enter the place now where vision begins. And I want you to imagine, I'm inviting you to imagine the midnight blue. The midnight blue. The dark, deep blue of midnight. And that may well be where we are, the science of midnight. That there's a 1% chance that we would hit 1.5. There's a 5% chance that we would hit 2 degrees in the coming years. And that it's most likely that we would be somewhere between 3.7 and 4.9 degrees, an inhospitable Earth. And it's holding that science of midnight for a moment and allow the light, allow liminal space into that light, into that midnight, into that deep midnight blue that we feel is the science, that we hear is the science, that we know as the science. Allow your light body to enter into that science that you are holding, into that concern, into that fear, into that worry. Allow your light of your whole body, and especially your heart, to be in that. So with all your senses, you're entering this space now. Your sense of touch, your sense of taste, your sense for sound, your sense for what you see, your sense for temperature, your sense for movement, your sense of where you are in the world and where the world is in you. Enter into this space with all your senses. And imagine a dawning. in this midnight blue, whatever that means to you, in this midnight blue with your light and with all your senses, imagine a dawning. Staying with the heart, staying with your senses. And as you do that, feel, if you can, feel your longing in it, your wanting. Remember a feeling that reminds you of longing and wanting, desire. In Sufism, we work with desire. Imagine your whole body in that longing, with your senses, with your light. Filling your whole body with this wanting, this desire. What is it that we're going to desire together? What is it that we're going to lend all of our senses to, all of our light to, all of our longing to? What is that? Maybe we don't know yet. Maybe we have a sense of it. But let's feel it. Let's feel it first, in from the heart. And this last piece, imagine your body and your whole heart asking for what you want. This bit that we find so hard to do, asking for what you want, asking for help. You might ask Spirit, you might not. It's okay. You might ask the non-human. You might not. You might just be asking yourself. Imagine what the feeling of asking is. So now you are with light in your heart, with your senses alive, with full desire, with full longing. You're asking for what you need, for what we need, for what the Great Mother needs. This is visioning in the heart's eye. This is visioning in the heart's eye, from the heart's eye. Taking 3 deep breaths when you're ready. Through your whole body, 3 breaths. And then very, very slowly, I want you to start to give thanks. I'm inviting you to allow yourself into the place of gratitude for your whole self, for your whole heart, for all your senses, for all your beingness, for all the love and truth you carry, for all the wisdom and meaning you carry, for the light that you are. Deep thanks. And slowly, slowly, with gratitude for all of you and for all that is, and for the Great Mother, and for any spirit that calls you. Slowly, slowly, coming back into this call together. Thank you, beautiful humans. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with me in that. I'm so grateful. Oh, okay. So I'm going to speak to you now about a story before we say this might be co-liberation. I want to speak to you about a story, and this story is at the heart of why we might want to step into co-liberation. So humans, Homo sapiens, lived a very different way for 97% of their existence. Yeah. For 97% of our time as Homo sapiens, for over 190,000 years, possibly. There's a great dispute as to how long Homo sapiens have been here. We lived in matrilineal ways, in matrifocal ways, according to matriarchy. Mother and child were at the center of community organizing and of organizing for all. And something happened. Something happened. We don't know what it was. Something happened, and possibly a feeling of scarcity emerged. A feeling of scarcity emerged. And very slowly, somewhere between 4,000 and 10,000 years ago, we became a patriarchal culture. Patriarchy became the organizing principle. Women and children were owned, and land at the same time, it's no coincidence, land fell into new forms of ownership, and our relationship with the land changed, fundamentally changed. This story now appears in its last phase, possibly. Okay, remember, this is just a story for now. As it appears as modernity, it appears as capitalism, it appears as neoliberalism. And very right now, very in the present moment, and right here, right now, we're looking into the story of modernity, possibly on steroids, of an over-modernism, let's call it, on steroids, where we would adopt what sociology calls managerialism, yeah, and we would solve the climate crisis through uses of technology and through managing a global democracy, a fourth industrial revolution. It can be, some are looking at calling it that, stakeholder capitalism, surveillance capitalism. There are all these angles on how patriarchal culture and modernity might solve where we are, might meet the crisis, the multiplicity of crises of where we are. Yeah. And so what we're wondering, what co-liberation is wondering, is that, well, because that feels counter-liberatory, because that directly challenges what we might feel and regard as liberation, and liberation for all, our co-liberation, right? Where does that leave us? What does that leave us to do? What do we do with the social movements that we are in? And I want to just recognize at this point that there are people here, which is incredible for us, and thank you so much for coming, that aren't a general part of Extinction Rebellion. And I say general because I think we are entangled in and interconnected in so many ways, right? That it's hard. Where does one border begin? And isn't that what we're struggling with? Where one part begins and another ends, and one something is owned here and then it's not owned over here. So, but you may not be familiar with Extinction Rebellion, and I want to really welcome you and say, this is our story. This is why we're here, because it's time for a movement of movements, and more so. And what is it? What is the story that we could offer into this place where patriarchal culture tells us, is saying to us, there's a story of how we next go forward, and we've got the answer, folks. We've got the answer. Follow us. Yeah. So, CoLiberation. Okay, so we've been working trying to understand what is it that could bring us together. We've been trying to understand, what does reconciliation require for collaboration? We know that our greatest, the reason we're still here is because Homo sapiens decided they could collaborate, and we're wired for collaboration, right? That's why we're here. We're here for relationship of every kind and of every order. And yet we've been separated again and again from the patriarchal culture story of the caste system, yeah, where one of us is worth more than another. We've been separated, monumentally separated, yeah. And CoLiberation is saying, no more, no more, no more, no more, no more separation. We reject the scarcity story of patriarchy. We reject and we withdraw our consent for this separation. We are also, from that place, reject the story of powerlessness. And we are moving back into our relationship with abundance, our relationship with togetherness and belonging, and our relationship with power. And we've located what we think. Now, this is all an experiment. This is a vast experiment, folks. This is the land, this is the wilderness. Yeah. If you're familiar with Bayo Akamalafi's work, and if you're not, I'd highly recommend it. We are fugitives right now. Okay. We're fugitives. We're wanderers. We're wondering if there's 4 pathways here to CoLiberation. Yeah. Pathway 1 is the story of noticing our interdependence. This is true in every culture, and in every wisdom tradition, in every religion. There's a golden thread of interdependence. Yeah. This is also true in science, in the contagiousness of ideas theory of psychology, in chaos theory of physics. Yeah. It goes on and on. In neuroscience, mirror neurons. Yeah. The story of interdependence is everywhere. And in that story, your health depends on mine on yours. So does your freedom. So does your thriving and your well-being. So liberation, we're expanding. CoLiberation is saying, let's expand this meaning of liberation to notice all the ways that we are interbeing and interdependent on one another. Let's embrace what wisdom traditions and indigenous cultures have been telling us for all of time, yeah? As well as science now. By the way, right now at Oxford University, there are mathematicians working on a formula, yeah, and they think they've got it, for the interdependence of consciousness. Yeah. So That's pathway 1. Pathway 2, and I'll return to some concrete ways of how we bring this from the abstract into the being, into the acting. Pathway 2 is about the freedom pathway. Yeah. And what we're saying in the freedom pathway, and I want to just read you actually something from Audre Lorde, one of my heroines. Yeah. The white fathers told us, I think, therefore I am. The black mother within each of us, the poet, whispers in our dreams, I feel, therefore I am free. I love that. I love that. Because it moves us even from the Aquarian, we think, therefore we are, to I feel, therefore I can be free. And this is the freedom pathway, to notice that in these oppressed stories, we are both. And yes, there are humans of color and culture and identities who are systematically and deliberately and systemically continually silenced and marginalized and made other. Yeah. And yet still, we are both oppressor and oppressed. Because in this system that we all live in, we have been oppressed. Yeah. As children, we grew up, every single one of us, in oppression. And I want to just briefly tell you about this, taking us back to why this is about restoring motherhood and the mothering instinct in us all. Yeah. Because when you take out the mother and child from the center of society, when you do that, you create the primal wound, what I'm calling the primal wound, the original wound. But you separate mother and child. And this is a story that that most of us, it's not true of all cultures, but for most of us, this is the story we were born into. This is really uncomfortable. This bit, this is the bit when I was a postnatal leader for the National Childbirth Trust. This is the bit that was the most difficult to understand or be with or think about or feel, that we're all in this primal wound of separation. Yeah. There's a book called Why Does Patriarchy Persist by Carol Gilligan and Naomi Snyder that I so recommend, that my CoLiberation team are probably tired of me talking about, but I'll just say a little bit, that what they've identified is that at some point in childhood, in this patriarchal culture, we realize that our needs aren't going to be met. We learn, our bodies learn the scarcity framework, they learn the scarcity story. And we realize our needs aren't going to be met. Up until that point, we're in usually what's called healthy resistance. We will resist any threat to loss of relationship. The baby will scream the house down. The toddler will throw itself on the floor and rage to any threat to loss of relationship. When we've realized that our needs aren't going to be met, when the body realizes this and the heart realizes this, there becomes tragic despair and tragic heartbreak. And it moves us into what Naomi and Carol call political resistance. We will choose our battles. We will start to become numb in some places and choose our battles in other places. Yeah. Many activists are probably in political resistance. Yeah, that's where we are. The issue is that as a culture, we move where Naomi and Carol identify, we move into psychological resistance. So we will distract in any way we can from the pain. We will do anything we can to numb. We will create what psychology calls the double. We will become someone else just so we don't feel the pain of who we are. Yeah. We will consume and we will become insatiable. It lends to the Watiko, yeah, the insatiability of our culture. We cannot fill ourselves up, and that's where society in large is. And somehow we have to move back into healthy resistance, that we will resist any threat to loss of relationship together. And that, my family, is freedom. That's the freedom pathway. That's the freedom pathway. And that requires us to, it's Audre Lorde. It's when we can feel, and it's when we can transform the silences that we have labored under for thousands of years, especially as mothers and as women, and especially in that instinct to protect and nurture that is in all of us, including our children, even more so our children. That is freedom. That's pathway 2. There's much more I could say, and I'm looking at the time. Pathway 3 is the pathway of belonging. It's creating ways that we can belong to one another, again, working agreements in our communities, in our organizations, in our families, in our social movements, in our industries, in our corporations, wherever we are, creating belonging again, working together. The working classes are doing this right now in Stroud in such a beautiful way through COVID. They are creating all kinds of new pathways of belonging. It's very exciting. And pathway 4 is power. Power with and power within. This is a pathway that in the way we've designed it with CoLiberation, we're wanting to support people's power, their self-regulation and their self-leadership to rise. Yeah. We are collectively in deep trauma from original wounding and then from living in this toxic system, and from all the headbutts and all the heartbreaks, all the microaggressions and all the micro inequalities, right, that we labor under. We're in collective trauma. It's why we keep repeating and repeating. And pathway 4 is saying there are many ways that we can look to restore our power and restore our sense of self, to restore our wholeness, to mend, to repair. This is also the pathway of decolonization, because what modernity and the Enlightenment have decided is that there's a preferential way of knowing. There's a superior way. This is sometimes called white supremacy or the whiteness paradigm, right? There's a preferential way of knowing. It's a superior way of knowing. It's called scientific rationalism and scientific materialism. And you folk over there who do some weird things and talk about different ways of knowing and thinking and feeling, well, it's just not quite as good as what we've got over here in the science and in how we use our intellect, and how we use our scholarship, and how we can bring ourselves into academic ways of learning and interpreting and making meaning. It's I think my personal belief is right now, beliefs are always changing, is that this is the most insidious and the most devastating act of colonialism, is to say that we have a superior way of knowing. And this pathway says no more. We would like to we would like to recognize the many ways that what Audre Lorde called the manyness, the many ways of knowing and experiencing and making meaning of the world. It's when indigenous cultures call for rematriation as well as reparation. Yeah. It's what Tony Buzan says in his mind mapping and in his brain books. Hey, actually, there is spiritual intelligence. There is an intelligence that is not of what we know mostly here in the West. Yeah. So that's pathway 4. And it's, again, there's so much more. I've been talking for a while. This feels enormous. We are so excited that we might have a framework of bringing deep togetherness, of reconciliation, of belonging, of power, of freedom, right? We feel that this is something we would like to grow into a movement of movements. We would like to have all kinds of conversations based on this framework of co-liberation. We want to do something we believe is groundbreaking and paradigm shifting together. It's what my lovely dear friend and wonderful human Claire Farrell says. It's about creating extraordinary ideas and making extraordinary relationships and alliances. Yeah. So that, I will stop there because I could just go on, and I mustn't, because there's so much here, so much wisdom and collective spirit that I'm so interested in hearing. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Skeena. And we're going to now take some thoughts from anybody who'd like to speak. We've got about 15 minutes, and then we'll have a break, a comfort break, and come back. So we're not going to have much time for lots of people to speak, but if anybody would like to say how they feel and any kind of reaction to what they've been experiencing and hearing, please put your hand up and feel free to say how you feel. And we will be going into some breakout rooms after the break to talk in groups about this as well. Does anybody like to feedback or say how they feel about any part? April.
I'm just checking in. These are and as well pathways, are they, rather than either or?
Great, love. There's 4 pathways. We're thinking pyramid. We're trusting that you can just choose one pathway and you will meet the rest. There is no way of not choosing one and not meeting the rest. Yeah.
Kofi.
Yeah, my question has to do with why we are not emphasizing intersectionality and we are singling out matriarchy and patriarchy as if, that's, in fact, that the divisions in the world revolve only around patriarchy, because we live in a world where everything is used to divide, okay? And we have to understand that even race or gender or sexual orientation, they are also actively being used now to divide, okay? Mm-hmm. And so the cross section of factors of division, it's where we need to be meeting rather than create, poles, you know, which is just looking at the matriarchy, patriarchy poles, you know. And so if you're talking about co-liberation, I think intersectionality properly, you know, should be what we should be emphasizing, because then it looks like there's a choice being made about the factors of division and focusing on that. And that creates problems about, you know, creating a broadly inclusive, you know, unity where all the factors of, you know, injustice and justice, you know, can be brought together for a co-liberation, for a meaningful, holistic co-liberation, you know, approach. So
yeah,
I would like to bring that concern, you know, that framing, you know, it's excludes actually rather than unifies around co-liberation.
thank you, Kofi, for your comments. In Pathway 2 and in Pathway 4 particularly, we talk about intersectionality and pluriversality, and it's a big part of co-liberation. It's a big part of co-liberation, and I agree that when you don't talk about it, and you've just said it, and I felt my heart go, oh gosh, you know, of course I didn't say it. The agreements, so we're asking for systemic agreements to be made to honor Pathway 2 and Pathway 4. And in those systemic agreements is the work of intersectionality and the work of pluriversality, and naming where we've got lost in our separations around racism and colonization and imperialism, right? So it's right in there, Kofi. I want to reassure you. I want to apologize for not naming it as I spoke about it. It is absolutely central to the ethos. In fact, for me, it was the tension that personally I've been trying to work with, right? That many of us have, my whole, well, since I've been 15 years of age. The tension is that anti-racism work, some anti-racism work, some anti-oppression work repeats separation. And this is quite hard for me to say, and I don't know if I've ever really said it, but
that is true, very true.
And what thank you, Kofi. And what we're trying, and the tension, and you know, we've got it in the XR system. What tension are you trying to solve? Why would we do this? We do this because, as you've just said, oh, and I thank you so much for saying it, we have to look at how we've been separated. And we have to look at the reality of that and meet it with a new reality. And meet it with some clearly articulated words through that bring us all together, where we all see ourselves in it. And I hear you around, is this patriarchy, matriarchy? It is not, and yet still, I think the devastation of the Great Mother is linked to how we have externalized mothering and the mothering principle, and how we have demolished that within ourselves.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Alex.
Hi. Yeah, I was very excited at the first sound of co-liberation because of improving on anti-racism and anti-patriarchy, and the rest of it's a positive vision, which is stronger. But I'd like to suggest we can consider extending intersectionality further, because my concern is that this so far has been a completely human-centric narrative. 99.9999% of living beings don't have a voice, don't have a vote, they're not represented here, they've never been explicitly recognized in XR. If we had a magic wand and could cure patriarchy and racism and ableism and classism and all the rest of it, we'd still be fucked, we'd still be dead in a few decades because the ecosystem's collapsing. unfortunately, us in the minority world, it's not that we've lost as individuals that culture of interdependence with other living things. We've never had it. Our culture's extinguished it before we were born. And we've also gone around and extinguished it from most of the majority world too. There's not many people left in the world who have a decent culture of interdependence with other living things. We don't have much time left to try and reach out to those who are left and try and relearn it from them. Is there any space in this framework for trying to reconnect with other living things and try and get them explicitly recognized? Though in saying that, I'm aware that what might make us is this conflict between trying to be as good as we can and actually being a mass movement. And if we go too far towards trying to tackle speciesism, will we be too weird for the rest of the world to connect to, and we just become a waste of time? So I recognize that for my time so far in XR, I haven't been talking about this stuff because I realize we've got to connect to people, not be too weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just want to name the conflict, and I don't know I don't know what the correct line to take is.
Alex, thank you so much, and it's so lovely to see you, by the way. Really, thank you for coming. So we are on the brink of ecological collapse, is what that's the reality you're talking about, right? And isn't it fascinating that we've talked human, although I know I've said non-human a couple of times, and isn't it fascinating that the lenses that we're looking through right now are human-centric and carry on that story. And I think but I also think, especially in pathway 1 and 4, that's what we're trying to bring in. That in interdependence, we're going, hold on, what about our ecological systems? What about the fact that the rare earth minerals for the 40 billion devices that we have, that will soon become 50 billion, right? We can't keep mining for them. Our ecosystem will not cope with that. Okay. What about species loss and the disintegration of then all of the primary earth systems? What about that? So I think it's there in pathway 1 for us to discover, and in pathway 4, in the power pathway, I don't think we can actually come into power until we understand our place in nature. That nature means to be born. That is the children of all species, right? And that is all that is born in nature, and that we have a place in that rather than ownership of it, and all of the other things that we think that we have domination over in that sense, right? So thank you for naming it. And CoLiberation is this journey of us, you and I, Alex, and all of us here going, what does it need? What are we missing? What bits do we need to really work through? And this is one of them. One of the ideas, though, just to say, for a systemic agreement, for XR to really live in this, is that we would, at the beginning of every meeting, we would go into nature for 5 minutes and go, hold on, it's not just us here. It's not just us, as a systemic agreement. Yeah. So it's then there's work to do, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks. Marvina.
Thank you so much. It was nice just listening and hearing what's been said. I want to say thank you, Uncle Kofi, for just saying what you did say. I can't emphasize enough about how we need to really frame and decolonize our language. I can't emphasize as much how we need to look at ways that when we talk about intersectionality, I also really want to add on top of that and say we need to talk about class and privilege. The reason that is so important, it's about how does what we say relate back to those who are oppressed? How does what we say give them the power to take that fight and do something about that? How do we make sure when we speak, we look at the multiple layers that might be barriers to people accessing the information? So it's one of those things when I'm learning, and I love the idea of what collaboration would stand for, what it can achieve. But then also I feel, how do we build that strong sense of allyship in that process? How do we give people back that power that individuals can take actions to make sure we get to where we need to get to? How do we make it everyone's responsibility, not something that they can just look at and move past because it doesn't affect them?
Yeah.
How do we make this not a tick box activity where you sit in the space thinking, well, I've attended this and I'm part of it, but then I take the information and I don't do anything with it. So one thing I'm really keen on is action-based. Learn and act. So listen, learn, act, and yield your power. That's the best way to be an ally. And always saying is, in my point of view, collaboration to me should be seeing me, hearing me, and finding out how is my voice. You need to empathize with what my struggles will be, and then finding a way to remove those layers so I can then amplify my voice, not the other way around, not you speaking for me, but you helping me take space.
Yeah.
No, not you trying to, when I say you, I mean like general, with the liberation kind of mentality. You talked about Audre Lorde and you talked about Martin Luther King. It was a dream until action took place. Yeah. And that's the part that is very important. We talk about intersectionality. Intersectionality is such a big thing, but without that should be always the starting point in my mind around liberation, because you leave people throughout if you don't put that as your foundation. But I love the fact that you've said that's something that you're going to do. And I just want you to encourage people to be allies. We're part of one human race. Race was constructed. Class, we need to look at the history of what climate change is: extraction of land, colonization, industrialization, and then you've got your history around climate change. So we need to be able to call a spade what it is, not cuddle it, and just push the truth and get action. Thank you, guys. I just wanted to just add that, and I hope everybody receives this message well. But thanks, Skeena, for this place.
Marvina, thank you so much for being here, sister. I really, really value your presence here with us. Yes. So it is about turning this into action. Absolutely. And so again, I've given you the bare bones of coLiberation right today, the bare bones, and actually the whole point is that we want us to create the flesh and the beautiful hair and the, you know, all the strands, all the fingers, all the toes together, right? This is an experiment with a new story and a new way of doing things, and there is great action intended in it. So so for example, and Marvina, you spoke so eloquently about how we need to hear the stories of the people, right? Who are at the intersections, the depth of the pluriversality, both the countable and uncountable ways of people and who we are and how we show up. So for example, in pathway 1, we're saying, and it says, here's a dream I have for this work in action, is that every affinity group would have a truth and reconciliation process in the community they occupy, with people who are at those intersections, right? And we would hear the truth, and we would transform the silence of their voices together, and we would witness them, and we would witness them, and we would say, right, what do we need now together? Yeah. So that for me again is something that we can agree as a systemic agreement, that we would ask all our affinity groups. And we have globally, you know, we have, I think, nearly there's over 800, and here in the UK I think there's over 250, right? Imagine if every affinity group went out into its community for a truth commission process, for a reconciliation process. Imagine the power of that, right? So I really, again, I'm saying yes, of course. Thank you so much. There's so much to do, and let's work it out. Let's work it out from the CoLiberation perspective.
And Skeena, sorry about this. The only other part I was going to add, we need to think about when we talk about climate change, when we talk about the first 5 countries that are going to be hit by this. So I want to put in perspective when I think about it and link back to climate change and climate justice. First top 3 countries are melanated countries. They're countries like Nigeria, Lagos, that like Yemen, like, you know, Haiti. Those are the top 3. So like when we say we can't remove these conversations, and I know sometimes we do because obviously based on our lens. So even our environmentalism has to be intersectional.
Yes.
Even our way of thinking, we need to look at why is our green spaces so white? Big conversation. Are we ready for that? And what do we do to bring that back? So that's, I'm going to shut up now and leave it to everybody, but just a little word of caution moving forward. That also in your spaces, look at how do you bring collaboration, even starting from today. How do I bring that diversity in my little groups that I'm in? Who is not in the room and why are they not in the room? And am I willing to have that truth and reconciliation to say, you know what, I know that I might have not been welcoming. You just need to just accept it, or I might have not been able to reach out as much. That we're not hard to reach. People are not hard to reach. Let's remove that barrier and then just connect on that spiritual intelligence and that human being. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. So valuable. Thank you so much. So important. I'm now just concerned about time, because we wanted to be in breakout. I was relying on my gorgeous facilitators, our gorgeous, and I think we've got a bit lost. So I'm wondering if we can move into our breakout rooms now, Mark and April. What do you think?
Can we just have, I think maybe a 2-minute comfort break, and then we'll come back and we'll do breakout rooms.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for presencing each other and for listening to each other. So we have maybe, you know, just a few minutes to hear from maybe just a few teams, a few of the breakout rooms, something of the essence of what you could feedback. Maybe if there is anyone with something that was that really strongly came through, that was a passionate kind of feeling. Would anyone like to share from their feedback group? Oh, there's. Yes, Rachel.
Yeah, the big thing that seemed to come through was, how do we go from vision to action? And what are the steps? What are the practical steps? How do we embody this? So how does it become a verb? Again, it's this idea of embodying the change.
Thank you. Don.
What came across in our room was a sense that we do need to learn a lot from Indigenous people. The spirituality really was welcomed, because somebody commented that they haven't really come across much spirituality in XR before, and that there is this tension between spirituality and capitalism, and it was felt that people would like to see an emphasis on the spiritual side as a way of challenging the narrative of capitalism.
Thank you, Dawn. One thing I will say, there's a question in the feedback in the chat about whether we can hear everybody's. There will be a document harvested where everybody, I'd like to request that everybody sends in the notes taken, because we won't have time here. This is a limited breakout time on this Zoom room, and it will go off. So I would really hate to be cut off without giving ourselves a chance to presence and ending, presence, you know, some kind of finishing together. So we will, all of those who've taken the feedback, let's feed that back in, and that will come out with the recording. Sarah Louise.
Oh, hi. Sorry, it wasn't ready. I think Marvina had her hand up first, if that's all right, and it will give me a second to collect my thoughts.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Marvina.
No problem. Thank you, everyone. I think from our group, we kind of feedback the importance of making sure those that we're trying to liberate are in the room, leading the conversation, and making sure that we look at how we get them to give us the directions of where we want to go. Also, we also talked about the fact of accessibility of knowledge, of information being shared, and trying to move away from academic kind of speeches and looking at accessibility of neurodiversity, or how materials are delivered moving forward. And also that sense of collaboration will mean different things to different people, but the restorative practice approach might be great, but always making sure you put the oppressed group in the front of your conversation, even though while encouraging the oppressor to look at their ways they can change in the truth and reconciliation kind of gender. So that was, I hope that's a summary from the group, or if there's anything that any member of the group wants to add, please drop in the inbox or anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Marvina. Sarah?
Hi, sorry about that. So one of the points that came up was actually to be able to do the work of embodying a different kind of system and a different culture. We first need to learn what the system is and what the culture is that we're embodying at the moment, because most of these discriminations and oppressions that are happening, we're unaware of. So it's almost like, yeah, step one is kind of learning to unlearn.
Thank you, Sarah Louise. Yeah, that's a deep one. Yep, Jenny, and then Ali.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. For me, I just really feel it'd be great to front and center listening. And then we can perhaps hear the voiceless, because we're going to not just listen with our ears, our eyes, all our senses. If we actually listen with all of our senses and front and center that, then we're also moving away from speciesism and different languages. We'll actually be able to feel it. And not just, and I also feel need to say, yeah, imagination's good, but actually we can feel the movement of our own hearts. We can actually feel it. And so just really wanting to front and center the whole felt senses. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Ali. Alison?
Oh, I wasn't sure if you meant me or not, sorry. Yeah, our group said a lot, but I've just picked out a few things. One thing I think was really important was that there was a fear that XR's call to action could be lost in a sea of words. There was some questions around who are the agents of change, who can bring about this deep revolutionary change. There was a fear that we won't really be able to live from our hearts, because if we're facing, well, we are facing existential threats. How do we manage to trust our heart whilst also bearing the weight of the trauma? yeah, I'll leave it there because we're running out of time, but we have said a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we are running out of time.
Dorothy has a hand up.
Sorry. I'm presencing the fact that actually we're running out of time. We have 5 minutes left to kind of pull something together. There is a document Tom has put in the chat group, which is leads you to ways that you can get further involved with the CoLiberation work, help support rolling it out and getting I guess this idea of, you know, how do we actually create actionable steps? I think I'd like to just bring us to a close with a reference to a story by Ursula Le Guin called that Beo Akomalafi brought to me and made me think on, which was a story about those who walked away from Omalas. Omalas was a magnificent city, free of suffering, a utopian city where everything worked. There was liberation, there was freedom, there was, you know, balance, and however, there was one fly in the ointment, and that is that there was one child in a tunnel beneath the city who bore all the suffering in order for this utopian city to survive. And everyone in Omalas knew about the child. They know about the child who suffers. And they all have their ways of justifying why it's okay. Hey, the child has never known anything more than that. You know, they don't know what a different life is. It's okay. Look, there's thousands of people here living successful, you know, purposeful lives. You know, it's only one child down there. And there are some who cannot justify it to themselves, who cannot live with the idea that their perfect utopian lifestyle rests on one child suffering. And those are those who walk away from Omalas. And Beo, that's where the story ends. And Beo had us ask the question, what do those who walked away from Omalas do differently? What is it that they do differently to not just to walk away and forget that there's a child who suffers? And what happens if some of them become tunnelers? And he said this the week before the tunnels started were opened at the HS2 camps. What if some of them become tunnelers and they find the child who suffers under the city? What do we do then? Stories are incredibly powerful, and we can meet the truths that are kind of forced on us as propaganda, as the way things are. We can meet these with stories of real life, of the way people are trying to do things differently this time, trying to meet. Maybe we can feed these stories to the child who suffers, and maybe we can grow the kind of ears that will listen to what it's like to be the child who suffers, and to feed those stories back to Omalas till everybody chooses to leave. Because one way or the other, Omalas is coming down. And we might have a chance for that, you know, to exit that and have a whole new way of living together that we just can't imagine yet until we start talking about it, until we start getting in the room, till we grow the ears that can hear what it's like to be the child who suffers, and really wonder together vulnerably how we can make that different. I want to say thank you to Skeena. I want to say thank you to Dawn and Tom and all the people who made this call possible. and all the people who have been working incessantly, constantly trying to evolve something that we can speak to in this, and a way for us to go forward with that. I'm just gonna, this last minute, is there something anyone would like to add, Skeena?
Sol has something, I think. Sol, is that okay, love?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just appreciating, I guess, that this is quite a radical proposal in a sense, and I guess you'll have seen within it the strategic requests. So we would really, really appreciate support in whatever shape or form you can give that. And one of those ways is just saying you would like to offer your support by your name or by your circle that you might be part of, and that would be really, really helpful. Just to offer that support in that way, or kind of more administrative or joining the circle, whatever way you can, would be really helpful for this collaborative, cooperative inquiry together.
Yeah, there's just been something in the chat channel that says maybe we could be useful to meet again to talk about the action piece, the proposal piece, because this is very much has been about the dream, right, and the need, the story. So maybe that could be possible, and let's perhaps think about that. Thanks, everyone.
It's okay if I just speak some lesson before we leave. So we just take that action moving forward in that spiritual. Is that okay?
Please.